Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Shekalim Daf Yudalid primarily discusses the various administrators who were responsible for tasks and departments in the Beis Hamikdash. We have just seen a Mishnah which listed 15 such people. The Gemara will discuss them one by one, mostly Agadata, discussing the various tasks and missions that they did. Then we get to two more Mishnayos. One Mishnah lists another group of workers and administrators in the Beis Hamikdash, and then the second Mishnah moves on to discuss the process by which people were able to buy Nesachim supplies for Karban Mincha and Karban Nesachim in the Beis Hamikdash. So first of all, the Gemara is discussing Nechunya, who he was responsible to dig wells and places for people to drink on the way to Yerushalayim, on the way to being Ola L'Regel. And the Gemara, there are a few parallels to this Gemara in the Bavli. The Gemara says that although he did this chesed with water and he gave people water to drink, still his own son passed away from thirst. He had some incident that happened to him which caused him to die of thirst. Says the Gemara, you see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very machmir with those who are close to him, and he's very machmir altogether. He deals stringently with people. Anybody who says that Hashem is lax, he's relaxed, and he just let things slide, he himself is going to slide. He uses an expression that means that his internal organs should slide, meaning he should have a lot of gastrointestinal disorders and loose stools. So the Gemara says, you can see from two psukim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very strict with those that are close to him, those that are tzaddikim. One is Usvivav Nisara Moed, around him is very stormy. The word Nisara is spelled with a sin instead of a samach, which leads it to look like the word Sa'ara, which means a hair, to show that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is exacting with those who are close to him, with tzaddikim, as far as the thickness of a hair. And the other pasuk is Neiru Al Svivav. He is awesome. He is frightening around all those who are around him. He's even more frightening around those who are near him and around him than those who are distant from him. Now the Gemara brings a story which in the Bavli happened with Nechunya himself. The Gemara here seems to indicate it happened to somebody else. The Gemara says there was a chassid, there was a tzaddik. He used to dig wells and ditches and pits for people to be able to get water. And then his daughter was swept away by a river. According to some versions, it was actually his daughter who fell into one of the holes that he dug. But she swept away, and she was assumed to have drowned. And everybody came to be menachemim, to console him, as he was sitting shiva, and he would not accept their consolation. He had a hard time accepting the decree of Shemayim. So Pinchas ben Yair himself came, and still it was not effective. He didn't accept it. So Pinchas ben Yair said to the townspeople outside, he said, this is very strange. This is your tzaddik, this is your holy man, and he's not accepting the din of Shemayim. So they said to him, Rebbe, this is the story. He used to dig these wells, and then his own daughter fell in. So when Pinchas ben Yair heard that, he said, it's not possible to say that somebody had a tragedy in an area that he himself excelled in. And that started a rumor. The rumor spread around that she was really survived, and that was the truth. She was alive, and she was found. She was alive. Two versions as to how she was saved. One is that she caught a branch in the river, and the other is that a malach, an angel in the form of Pinchas ben Yair himself, came down and saved him. Gemara goes on to the next job, which was Gvini. His job was to be the crier. He used to walk around in the morning and wake people up to go to their job. The Gemara says what he used to shout was, Kahanim, get up for your work, for your avoda. Levim, get up to go onto the stage and sing. And Yisraelim, get up for your shift. There was a rotation of Yisraelim that would represent the rest of Yisraelim to stand at the Hakrava, the sacrifice of the Karban Talmud. So the Gemara says that Givini's voice would travel very far. It once traveled so far that Agrippas, who was the king, heard it at a distance of 8 parsa. It's about 20 miles away. And he was so impressed that he gave Givini lots of gifts based on that. Okay, next the Gemara says the Mishnah had taught us that the person responsible for the locking of the gates was named Ben Gever. The Gemara notes that there's a Mishnah Mesachas Yuma that refers to Gever, and it says that the Trumas Hadeshan, the avodah of removing the ashes from the Mizbech in the morning, was performed at the cry of the Gever. The Gemara says there was a machlokas between Rebbe and other Talmidei Chachamim in the Beis Medrash what Gever means. Rebbe had said that it means, Gever means a person. The person who was the crier, that was probably Gvini. But they said, no, Gever means a rooster. So he said, if you look at this Mishnah, it says that Ben Gever was somebody's name. Nobody would be named the son of a rooster. So obviously, Gever means a person and not a type of rooster. Okay, next job we had seen in the Mishnah was Ben Bevai. His job was to take care of the wicks. Gemara says that the lights in the menorah were supposed to burn the entire night and go out in the morning. Weren't supposed to burn too short and not too long. So he would adjust the thickness of the wicks in order that they should burn the proper amount of time. That's who he was responsible for. Gemara quotes a related story. The Rabbi Yossi went to the town of Kufra, and the people there needed somebody to be in charge, to take care of the needs of the townspeople. It was an issue of life and death, and he tried to find somebody to appoint to the job, but everybody refused. So he felt that they were refusing because they felt it was beneath them. So he said, look, Ben Bevai did as menial a job as taking care of the wicks, and he was a tremendous Talmid Chacham. Not only that, but he got tremendous schar for it. So if you'll take care of this job, which has people's lives dependent on it, you'll certainly get a lot of schar for it. Okay, next job in the Mishnah was Ben Arza. He was responsible for the musical instruments, specifically the cymbals. Umar explains how things worked. At the time that the carbon tamid was brought and the nesachim were poured on the mizbeach, that was time for the Leviim to start singing. But they couldn't see from their place on the steps of the heichal. They couldn't see what was going on top of the mizbeach. So an assistant would stand there. If the kohen gadol was being makriv, it would be the skan kohen gadol, the assistant kohen gadol. If it was a regular kohen, it would be some other kohen. He stood there, and when he was about to pour, he waved the flag. As soon as he waved the flag, Ben Arza clashed the cymbals, and the singing and musical instruments began. The orchestra struck up. Next person in the Mishnah is Hugras Ben Levi. He was responsible to conduct the choir. Gemara says he had a particularly sweet voice. His voice, in fact, was so sweet that if he stuck his thumb in his mouth, he could make so many different types of pitches and tones and notes that when the Kahanim heard him sing, they would all jump back in shock. Okay, next we had Beis Garmu, and their job was to make the lechem apanim. They were able to do it in a particular way. The lechem apanim were breads that were made every week, and they were shaped like a box missing the sides. It was a difficult thing to make. You had to be able to create walls and fold over the top without it collapsing and without it spoiling. Gemara says Beis Garmu were the only ones who knew how to do that, and at some point there was a labor dispute, I guess, between Beis Garmu and the Chachamim went to look for somebody else who knew how to do it. So they found special artisans in Alexandria who were able to do it, but the way they did it didn't quite work out too well, and their breads, although they were able to make the shape, they couldn't get it out of the mold. When they tried to, it either fell apart, or they had to do it in a certain way that made it spoil. So there's different versions as to what happened here. Either Beis Garmu took it out of the mold in the oven, and the Alexandria people took it out of the oven, or vice versa. And whichever way it was, they weren't able to get it out properly without it spoiling, and it used to get moldy. So the Chachamim said, it cannot be that the house of Hashem will have low quality things. It has to be, it says, Kol ma shabar kadosh baruch hu l'chavoidei bar, everything Hashem created was for His honor, like it says, Kol pal Hashem l'ma'aneyu. We have to have it done properly. They went and they called back the Beis Garmu people and said, we're hiring you back. And they refused to come. They said, don't do them no favors. So they had to double their wages. It used to be, according to one version, 12 mana, and they doubled it to 24 mana. According to the other version, it started as 24, and then they doubled it to 48. It doesn't say for each week or for each time or for each year or whatever it is. It is a very extravagant amount of money. Anyway, the Beis Garmu people refused to teach anybody else the special secret how to make the lechem apanim, and the Chachamim were upset about that. They criticized and they said, why don't you teach it to somebody else? You're going to take the secret with you to the grave. So they said, we have a Messiah, we have a tradition that this Beis Hamikdash is going to be destroyed, and if the secret of how to make the lechem apanim is revealed, it'll end up spreading around, and people use it for avodah zarah. We're guarding the secret, so it shouldn't be used for avodah zarah. Now, the Chachamim were not happy with it. They criticized them. However, they did compliment them on one thing. Nobody in their family ever ate white bread in order that people shouldn't accuse them of using lechem apanim, flour, or bread for their own food. Very similar story happened with Beis Haftinas. They were the people who knew how to make the ketores, the incense that was burned. They knew how to add, first of all, they knew the proper formula, and second of all, they knew how to add a certain herb that would make the smoke go straight up. Gemara says that nobody else knew how to do it, but again, it was a labor dispute. They went to the artisans of Alexandria, of Mitzrayim. They knew how to make the formula, but they didn't know how to make it go straight up. When they made it with the right formula, but the smoke would spread out all around the room. It wouldn't go straight up to the ceiling. Supposed to Beis Haftinas, when they did it, the smoke went straight up in a straight line like a stick, it hit the ceiling, and then it spread out over the rest of the room, and that was much better. And the Chachamim weren't happy with it. They said again, everything Hashem created for His own honor. Like it says, it's got to be that it's in the highest level. So they went and they called back Beis Haftinas. They said, we'll give you the job back. They said, no, we don't want the job back unless you raise our wages. So they doubled it either from 12 to 24 or from 24 to 48. And again, they said, why don't you teach somebody else how to do this, or teach them what is the mala ashan, what is the ingredient that makes the smoke go straight up? And they said, we know this Beis Mikdash is going to be destroyed, and we don't want it to go for people who are going to use it to avoid Zarah. So again, the Chachamim criticized them, but they did give them one in compliment. The women of Beis Tinnis never wore perfume, so the people shouldn't accuse them of stealing Ketores. As a matter of fact, any man from Beis Tinnis who went to marry somebody would make it clear before they got married, you're not going to wear perfume because that is the minig of this family. Now the Gemara has two stories about Beis Tinnis. The Gemara says that Rabbi Yossi says, once I was standing in Yerushalayim and I saw a child from the house of Beis Tinnis, and I said to him, where are you from? He said, I'm from Beis Tinnis. He said, well, your family tried to get a lot of honor, covered, and that's why they kept the secret to themselves, and now HaKadosh Baruch Hu is taking the honor away from them, and he's given it to the rest of Shemayim, and it's eventually going to go back. Now that there's no Beis HaMikdash, he doesn't have the honor, and the honor was taken back to Shemayim. It's going to be destroyed. There's a different version of this, that his honor is lost and the honor of Shemayim is lost because the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. Now Rabbi Kiva says, I once met Shimon ben Loiga, and he told me that he was collecting herbs in the field, and there was a child there of Beis Tinnis who was also collecting herbs, and he was laughing and crying. So he said to him, why are you crying? Why are you laughing? He said, I'm crying because of the covet, the honor of my father's house that has been lost because of the destruction of the Beis Mikdash. Why are you laughing? I'm laughing because it's going to come back. Mashiach will come, the Beis Mikdash will be returned, and we will get our honor back, as will the rest of Klal Yisrael, and as will HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he said, but why now? He said, well, I just spotted some of the Mala Ashan, some of that special herb, and it reminded me. So he said, okay, so show me. He said, no, our tradition, our family is the noble. We don't show this to anybody. We don't let anybody else know about it. Third story, which shows that the secret was revealed at some point, of Yochanan ben Nuri says, I met an old man of Beis Tinnis, and he had a scroll. And the scroll had all the ingredients of the Ketores in it, including a picture of each one as to what it looked like. And he gave me the scroll. He said, take care of it. In the old days, my family was very tzenua. They were very strict, and they guarded the secrets carefully. However, now things have changed and they're loose with it, so I'm taking it away and I'm giving it to you, guard it carefully, so that it shouldn't be lost and given to Avodah Zarah. When Rabbi Kiva heard that, his eyes flowed with tears, and he said, we don't have to criticize them anymore. They weren't doing it for their own kavod, they were doing it for the kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, two more jobs before we get to the Mishnah. There's the Elazar, who was in charge of the curtains. He was in charge of the weavers, the different weaving that they did, and Pinchas HaMalbish was in charge of the clothing for the Kohen Gadol. He dressed them. He was their personal valet. Gemara says a big schus to dress people like that. The story of a Kohen who was the valet for a certain officer, and he paid him 8 gold coins, possibly 12 gold coins, as his service. We now begin the next Mishnah, which discusses other jobs that there were in the Beis HaMikdash besides the 15 discussed in the previous Mishnah. And this Mishnah discusses 3 levels of authority about the finances of the Beis HaMikdash. So the lowest level was 3 Gizbarim, 3 treasurers who were in charge of all the money that was in the Beis HaMikdash. Overseeing them were 7 supervisors. The Mishnah calls them Markolin, possibly from the term Omar Kol. Everything they says goes. So there were 7 of those. So there were 7 supervisors on 3 treasurers, and overseeing the 7 were 2 higher officials who oversaw them. Now, the Mishnah adds, any responsibility that involves money has to be at least 2 people. You can't have one person doing it on his own, because you need to have trust. You need to have mutual accountability. The only exceptions to that are Ben Achia, who we saw was in charge of the medications for stomach disorders of the Kohanim, and Elazar, who was in charge of the parochos, the curtains which covered the gates of the Beis HaMikdash. And the reason why they were given this dispensation is because they had special trust from the tzibor. Now, all the other people that are mentioned individually in the Mishnah were all in partnership with another person. They were just the primary official, and that's why it mentions their name. Okay, the Gemara discusses the sources for these levels of authority, the 2 people on the top, then the 7, and then the 3, and the Gemara brings psukim from Divrei Hayamim, which actually give the names of these people at the times of the first Beis HaMikdash. So it says you had one level of authority. The psukim list Yechiel, Azazyahu, and Nachas. Those were the 3 Gizbarim. Those were the treasurers. Then you had Asal, Yerimos, Yezavad, Eliel, Yismachayahu, Machas, and Benayahu. Those were the Amar Kolin. Those were the supervisors. On top of them were 2 officers, which the Gemara calls Kaslikin, and they were named Shimi and his brothers. and his brother. So it was Kananyahu. So Kananyahu and Shimi were brothers who served as the officers. Now these answered directly to the Kohen Gadol who appointed them, and the Kohen Gadol answered directly to the king himself. Now the Gemara describes the process by which money was sealed in the treasuries of the Beis HaMikdash, and it was in reverse order. So the lowest level was the Gizbarim. They sealed it with their own seal, and they gave the control of the situation to the supervisors that were above them. They seal it, put on their own seal, and then they give it over to the officers. The officers put on their seal, and then the Kohen Gadol puts on his seal, and then the king puts on his seal. When you need to open it, the king first comes and inspects his last seal and checks to make sure that it has not been tampered with. Then the Kohen Gadol comes and checks his seal, then the overseers, then the supervisors, and finally the Gizbarim themselves come and unseal the money and have access to it. Now, the Gemara says, how do you know that you can't have less than two people? You can't have one person alone being in charge of anybody's finances, any public finances. Gemara says this from the pasuk that says, describing the donations to the building of the Mishkan. It says that the people who would collect it and be in charge of it was Haim. It was plural. Therefore, you need to have at least two. Now, the Gemara notes that even Moshe Rabbeinu was suspected of impropriety with public funds, despite his being Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Gemara first of all says that he was rich. Where did he get rich from? The Gemara says two versions: either that he was given by Hashem explicitly the chips that were left over from carving the luchos. The luchos were made of sapphire, and the chips were very valuable. And Hashem gave it to Moshe when he said, "Psal lecha shnei luchos avanim," carve for you 2 stone tablets, and therefore he said, "Lecha," it should be for you. Whatever's left over should be yours. The other possibility is that Hashem made a treasure under his tent. He made a mine, a valuable mine filled with precious stones and pearls underneath his tent, and he became rich from that. Now, the pasuk says, how did the Jews look upon his wealth? So Gemara says two versions based on the pasuk. They watched Moshe when he went into the tent and went into the Ohel Moed. So two versions. One said, look how fat he is, look how fat his legs are, look how fat his thighs are. You see, he's eating glug, he's eating good. That's off the money the food and the drink that he stole from the money of Klal Yisrael. And the other version, there were others who looked at him and said, look, praiseworthy is a people that has a leader like that, who is righteous and just. May we all be like that. We now begin the next Mishnah, which discusses the system by which Nesachim supplies were given to people who came to bring karbanos. That included Nesachim or Karban Mincha in the Beis HaMikdash. So, the various Nesachim or Minachos required oil, wine, or flour. These were difficult to make and keep on the proper level of refinement, purity, and non-spoilage. So the Beis HaMikdash kept storehouses of it, and people came and they were able to buy it from the Beis HaMikdash. The way the system worked is that they came to the person who was in charge of the money, whose name was Yochanan ben Pinchas. They would give him the money, and he would give them a token for the type of carbon that they were bringing, and the amount, which therefore also implied the amount of supplies that they needed. They would take the token and go to Achia, who was actually in the storehouse, and he would give them the supplies that they needed. Now, it was a machokes, Tanaim, between the Tanakama and Ben Azai, what type of tokens there were. According to Ben Azai, there were 5. According to the Tanakama, there were 4. They all agreed there was one that said on it egel, for a calf. The Mishnah explains that is for any cow of any sort, male, female, adult, or child. There was one that said on it zachar, that referred to a ram, that was only an adult male ram. Then there was one that said on it gidi, that referred to a sheep or a goat, child or female, large or small, and that was all those karbanas. And then there was one that said chayte, and that was for a mitzayra. Mitzayra had to bring up to 3 karbanas. The rich ones brought sheep, the poor ones brought only 1 sheep. The rich ones had to bring 3 sheep, the poor ones had to bring only 1, and other smaller karbanos. But the rich ones had to bring 9 lug of oil, 1 for each of the sheep. The poor ones had to bring only 3 lug of oil. So the chayte had to bring 9 lug. So his token said on it chayte, that was the rich Mitzayra. He was given 10 lug, 9 lug for his karbanos, and 1 lug of oil that was used to put on his person, on the body of the Mitzvah himself on his big toe and his right thumb, the right big toe and the right thumb, that was part of his tahara process, therefore he needed 10 lug of oil. Now, according to Ben Azai, there was another one that said a poor chayte, and he received 4 lug, 3 for his carbon, and 1 to go on his thumbs and big toe. According to the Tanakama, he didn't need 1. He brought the oil for the thumbs and the toe that he brought from home. And the 3 lug, he was just given a token that said on it, Gidi, because that is how much you got for a Gidi. You got a regular 3 lug for that amount. Okay. The Mishnah describes how the process went, and then it says that after the day was over, Achia and Yochanan would meet, and they would count up the money, and they would count up the amount of tokens that were given to Achia, and hopefully it matched. If it didn't match, then Achia would have to fill in, then Yochanan would have to fill in the lack from his own money, because he obviously gave out more tokens than he got. He was the one who had the money. If he didn't have enough money, he needed to pay for it. If there was extra money, Hektish would keep it. As always, Hektish gets the upper hand in any discrepancies. Now, if somebody lost a token, so there was nothing he could do about it. At the end of the day, he would have to come and say, listen, I lost my token. They would check and see if there was a discrepancy in the amount of money that was collected that was equal to 1 lost token, then they would give it to him. If they didn't find that discrepancy, then they would not give him that money. Now, the token also had the date on it, because if somebody found it, you shouldn't be able to use it tomorrow. Now, he may use it that same day, but unlikely that he would, because people would be on the lookout for a lost token, but he may use it a different day, and therefore it had the date on it. Okay, the Gemara explains Machlokas Ben Azai and the Chachamim that the poor Mitzvah could bring a lug from home. Then the Gemara says, what happens if somebody brings an adult female sheep, a Rachel? It doesn't say that in the Mishnah. It just says, it speaks about an adult male, or it speaks about a Gedi, a young sheep. So the Gemara says, no, but we said that Gedi means large and small, male and female, with the only exception of an adult male ram. So that is therefore included in Gedi, and that is what was brought, that was what was given to somebody who was bringing it.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.